Welcome. I'm Russ Rapp, and you've found your way to my YouTube channel about non duality. And I like to do these live talks about a weekly basis, typically on the weekends at this point. That could change, much like anything in life, but at this point in time, that's kind of what I've been doing. There's never really a specific time or even a specific day. So the best way to know when these live talks are going to happen is to subscribe. I try to sometimes give a notice on when it's going to happen, so you at least get a notification, give you a rough idea of when it's going to happen when I schedule it. So um, that's the best way to participate. You can also either watch my previous live talks or watch my other videos if you want to learn more in a more specific, especially my pre-recorded videos that I've done. If you want to find some of those based on the title, to get more of a quicker explanation and maybe more concise on non-duality, if you're curious on that. My latest video, The Big Lie of Non-Duality, is geared more towards folks that have already kind of somewhat learned about this subject and are still struggling with it. Maybe spent time, watching other speakers or reading, contemplating, meditating, and still just have issues that they are trying to find and seek answers to. So check that video out, partially because I want to get that one to have more views because I told my son it would be one of the top 3 videos of my channel. So The Big Lie of Non-Duality, it's less than 2 minutes, gets right to the point, hits you with a quick 1-2, and it's right there for you to consume. There's my plugging intro. I guess my goal at this point in time with my channel is to get to 1,000 subscribers. In order to be able to have more flexibility on these live chats, I think I'll be able to do it more remotely versus sitting in the corner in a room by a dresser and that sort of thing. I guess I could set up a better studio, but at this point in time, it's not as feasible. I know this is thrilling, but this is how the sausage is made, if you will, and getting the inside baseball of the goings on in the world of Russ Rap, sort of. So this talk is going to be dedicated to the faithful departed, those who have left us, those who have died, our loved ones. Death can be a difficult thing to deal with. Grief is something that we all as human beings struggle with because we all have loss at one time in our lives or more, dealing with the loss of friends or family, or even the loss of those that we don't know on a personal level, but we've connected with in one way or another. Just knowing the death took place can be a tough thing. If you look at people like Princess Diana, she's a good example of her death affecting millions of lives and people that never met her, never knew her, crying in the streets at the funeral. And so you never really know what kind of effect you can have on others in your life, or the effect that others have upon you. And so it's something that we all have to deal with. We all have to face the inevitable, um, with the idea of being alive, of living in a world based on time. There is a beginning and an end. Everything that has a beginning has an end, and everything that ends has a beginning. And so That's something that we deal with, that sometimes we try to avoid. It's the root of many of our basic fears of life is death, and we try to find ways to cope with that. And I think even in this niche of non-duality, dealing with death and the idea of non-existence is something that is at the heart of many of the conversations that we have. And oftentimes, we can be like unenlightened Buddhas, if you will, where we try to cope with it with a story that we tell ourselves. And yet, it's just another way of trying to avoid the grief, avoid the feelings that are difficult that we don't want to have to face, if you will. And so we can say things like, well, there is no person, or, death is unreal because, we're just aliveness in this moment. We are what is. Um, the person is an illusion. Whatever story or phrase you want to say that we use sometimes in talking about non duality, that's something that we do that can be helpful in understanding the nature of reality, but it can also be something that we use as a defense coping mechanism in order to kind of look at life abstractly, and in order to avoid the pain and the suffering that we may be feeling at the loss of a loved one, which is what it is. And if that's what you're using it for, that's what's happening. And I'm not here to judge your situation or what you're feeling or what you're trying to avoid feeling, because it can be tough losing someone you love. And just saying that there is no person, or saying that the world is an illusion, sometimes the falseness of those statements can hit you like a freight train when something in your life, especially when it's out of the ordinary, it's something that you didn't expect happens, and there's someone that close to you that dies, and all of a sudden these ideas that you have about reality or life or non-duality seemingly go through the window, because all of a sudden now you're dealing with this grief that you didn't think should exist, because how can grief exist when we didn't exist in the first place? And you can kind of see how it's yet another mental gymnastics technique that we do. I do want to say hello to Martin. He's been patiently waiting with his comment here that I've saw, but I didn't want to address quite yet because I was talking about grief and pain and death. Martin says, "Hi, Russ. Nice to see you broadcasting again. Thank you. Thanks for the effort. I've noticed non dual dreams occurring. It's really interesting. Did you get them sometimes during your journey?" Um, I've always been fascinated with dreams. It's been periods of time when I've kept dream journals. I've been interested in astral travel and different things like that. Um, and so I do definitely know that I dream. There's some people that, maybe don't dream or don't think that they dream, because I think a lot of it has to do with how your computer system up here, the memory system works, as far as um, clearing out what's seemingly irrelevant or not non-useful, or locking it away in a folder or a box or something in your mind that isn't easily accessible because it doesn't seem to fit the needs of the present moment. And so when you have these dreams, I'm not going to get into all like what are dreams and what's the purpose of dreams and all that, because that's a whole other subject that I'm definitely not an expert in. But when it comes to dreams, it seems like, there's definitely some processing of the day to day that occurs. For me, it seems like a lot of the times the dreams aren't necessarily current events that are happening, but maybe um, feelings or emotions that are being felt and related to things from the past that come up. So, there may be something that I'm dealing with now that appears as when I was in middle school or something like that, or high school or whatever. Um, but a lot of times people don't remember because they wake up and the mind kind of just says, well, this isn't important. So then you have that moment when you wake up. If you don't write it down right away or try to actively remember it, then it kind of just fades away like much in life because I've always been interested in the people that have memories of the day-to-day stuff that they experience that they can archive and access on a moment's notice. I can't think of the term for it, but the people that can say, okay, in 1995 May 5th, this is what I was doing and this is what I was wearing, this is what I ate that day, and they can retrieve that information. I always find that fascinating. But most I think your average person, they don't operate in that way where they can just pull up memories that easily. And so I think a lot of times your dreams just kind of fade away and you go on with your waking life, if you will. But sometimes I have dreams that seem more significant in other ways. I've had kind of hypnagogic experiences where you're awake but you're sleeping, you can see but your eyes are closed, and that kind of thing. Um, that's interesting, but I'm not going to get too far into that right now. Martin says, "Thanks for your answer, much appreciated. What's your thoughts on astral travel after the experience non-dual seeing? I practice it too. Got some interesting experiences." Um, I guess for me, it's somewhat of a confirmation, all of that stuff, in the idea that there's more to life than maybe meets the eye that we are aware of or willing to admit. It kind of begs the question, can you be apart from your physical reality? So, like, when you dream or have astral travel, you still have your mind, body, organism in the sleeping state, whereas your consciousness is somewhere else, but there's still that cord or that connection between the two existing. And so, it gets to, and it's kind of a good topic when it comes to death because we try to understand what happens after we die. We have stories, we have religious teachings, we have all sorts of ways to describe or understand. We have, personal experiences that are documented as far as, near death experiences and stuff like that, where we try to understand what happens afterwards, and so from a non-dual perspective, it's, you can't have one without the other. So, it's a lot of times we try to say, well, the brain is real, but the soul is not, or, but what happens after the brain is dead? What happens to the soul? Is it gone? Is it, or the mind, whatever you want to describe it, because, does it need that to exist? And then it goes down to the idea of the ego, personality, the soul. What is that, and what would potentially, you know, exist after we die? What would go to heaven? Are we a ball of light? Are we um, do we have the same type of a body, but it's just like the perfect representation of ourselves that, is infinite, and we can fly. You know? I don't have the answers, I guess, for that, but it's something that I've always been interested in. How that relates to non-duality, I'm not exactly sure, but I think, people are drawn to the subject. They're not really drawn to get something that they'll never understand, because what's the point of that? Because does anyone care about non-duality? Really? So there's these other subjects that are probably more interesting, and that's where I kind of come to with this. But Martin also wanted to say, wow, I also had the dreams of seeing with eyes closed. Never came across anyone before who would mention it. Um, yeah, that's been my most um, interesting. That's such a bland word. That's been my most I don't know what the word is. Interesting experience. I'm drawing a blank here. Um, and that's where this topic is something I'm interested in. So whenever someone's willing to talk about it, I always like to ask like specific questions and to get an understanding of what the experience really was like, or what it feels like, because there's an idea of, let's say, you so an example would be, and a lot of this has happened a long time ago, kind of when I was doing more meditation and stuff like that. And I'm sorry I'm not looking at the camera, I'm just thinking. I'll stare at the camera, sorry. That's what you're all here for, right? Validation. That's being tongue in cheek. So my experience is more of, um, when waking up in the morning and being awake, knowing that I'm laying in bed, but um, seeing the room around me with my eyes closed, and then seeing um, things floating around, like kind of like it's like a superimpose onto what I'm looking at. So there was one, I don't know if I'm getting into this, but I guess I've never really talked about it on here. I've told some people about it, where there was one where I was laying in a bed, and this is where I was somewhere else, but I was in a bed. And usually it's when I'm by myself, typically. So it's kind of back when I was single and slept alone. But I was laying in bed and woke up, and then I could see, like, it was almost like a little girl or something in a dress, like floating towards the ceiling. And the experience of it was that I was laying there looking and I could still see it. But then there's the experience of waking up and opening up my eyes and realizing that my eyes were closed the time before. And that's, to relate that to non-duality, it kind of is the same experience of realizing that your eyes were closed when they become open. So when I wouldn't have necessarily known that my eyes were closed laying there until I opened them up and realizing it was a different experience. And and then still seeing kind of the apparition superimposed, and then it kind of faded away, that sort of thing. I think the most unnerving, and I think, and I can use my speculation from what I've read and just through experience, but um my feeling on some of it is, having the sense of there was one, okay, another story that I experienced was laying in bed, and it was dark, and this is when since I've been married, and waking up, or no, not, I guess not waking up, but being in the hypnagogic state, if you will, where it's kind of in the in between state. And at one point, I remember having a dream of myself kind of hovering over my bed, kind of looking at the shadow laying there. So, kind of looking at myself. And then also waking up having kind of a simultaneous dream of having someone, like a dark figure, shadowy figure in my room, um, kind of coming closer to the bed and that sort of thing. And I remember in that particular case, it was like, oh, is that my brother or something like that? But um, I think if I were to speculate on it, I think maybe it's, the astral self integrating with the, um, the body, if you will. And this is all stuff that I'm just kind of, making up. I don't know. I'm not making up as far as like my experience of it, but I don't know what the heck's going on. So I'm not pretending to be an expert, but it's interesting. This is kind of like campfire, late night stories. Um, but the most unnerving one was when I was living in an apartment by myself, and kind of the same situation where I woke up, and this time I was laying. Usually, it's when I'm laying on my back. This time, when I was laying on my side, and I kind of sort of woke up, and it was probably the same situation of my eyes are closed, but I could see the room, and there was this kind of like grim reaper looking thing. And and part of it is, are you predisposed to see these imagery because that's what we're culturally shown as far as this is what things should look like and that sort of thing. So it's, chicken or the egg kind of conversation. But what I remember seeing is kind of like a wispy dark figure coming towards me, and not necessarily feeling afraid, but like the struggle of trying to stay awake because I was drawn to um fall back asleep, I guess, or go back into deep sleep. And so like it was like not a sense of fear, but like I want to see what this is. And that's kind of been the story of my life of, you know, lifting up the rock to see what's underneath, to go inside to see, what's at the depths of who we are or who I am. And so my whole feeling at the time was to stay awake and to see what this thing was. And um the best way I can describe it is, it kind of floated towards me, and as it got like, within a certain distance, I'm gonna make the sound, not to like creep you out, but and this is a sound that I experienced in a few other times of the same kind of situation where if I were to describe it or try to speculate on what it was, it feels like a reintegration. That's what I'm thinking it is, but I have no idea, like I said. But when the the Reaper type figure was coming towards me, or another time when it was more coming from behind, it's kind of like this sound where it's super kind of loud, almost like a train coming down the road. Where this is my impression of it. If this is from memory, so it's a memory of a memory, but the sound is like like this, like super loud. And then it was a sense of like a like a wind sort of like feeling, and then either I'd fall asleep and kind of wake up and remember that, or I don't remember exactly that afterwards, but I just remember the sounds pretty distinctly. And what does that have to do with non-duality? I'm not really sure, but who really cares? Does anyone care about non-duality? So there you go, Martin. You got me to talk about all that stuff. So that's interesting. Interesting's a throwaway term of a type 5 on the Enneagram. So to the faithful departed. I guess the genesis of my focus on this live talk came from when I think it was yesterday, listening to some songs from the band the Cranberries from Most people remember them from the '90s when they were um, topping. I don't know if they topped the charts, but they were popular in the '90s in the alternative rock scene, if you will. They were from Ireland, and that was it was the Cranberries, No Need to Argue, and Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club, I think, were the 2 CDs, to date myself. The first 2 compact discs that I had growing up. And I feel like a lot of times your early teenage to teenage years are those years where you're trying to figure out who you are, and so a lot of and you're kind of having a lot more free time to delve into, all this music and different things, and that's where I have an affinity for that, some of that music of that era and other eras is too. But that's where I think you kind of find your musical taste, and it's not like that for everyone, but it seems to be in a lot of ways. And so I really connected with the Cranberries' No Need to Argue album, and I like their Linger song from their first one. And there was something about Dolores O'Riordan and her lyrics and her style and everything. And I like how part of it's a little bit off-putting, that, it's in a way it's their differentiator, her vocal of, if you know their music, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's kind of like, it's kind of like cilantro. Either you love it or you think it tastes like soap. But she had I think it's the first song off that album is called Ode to My Family. And I'm going to read the lyrics or some of the lyrics to Ode to My Family off of the Cranberries album, No Need to Argue. Here it goes. Understand the things I say. Don't turn away from me. Because I spent half my life out there. You wouldn't disagree. Do you see me? Do you see? Do you like me? Do you like me standing there? Did you notice? Did you know? Do you see me? Do you see me? Does anyone care? And that's that, and there's other lyrics to that song, but you know I- it kind of really, I have an affinity for some of her other lyrics from other songs as well. But I think there's that idea when you get into non-duality is, does anyone care? You're talking about something that no one benefits from, and you don't nothing to achieve. You're kind of stating the obvious and pointing to the meaninglessness of it. But I think in her case, it was, kind of the idea of, does anyone care about what I have to say? Trying to find your voice. And I think a lot of people, including myself, can relate to that. It's, I look at, what do people seek when they look for things to look at on YouTube or listen to? Because even the more popular speakers don't even have that many subscribers compared to other genres or other interests, if you will. I think Science and Non-Duality was 200 and some thousand, which was quite a bit, which, I think is fine. Um, but even like Lisa Carnes has like 10, 11,000 or something. I don't know. Which sounds like a lot, but in the scheme of things, and in the amount of time, like I don't put that much time into this whole deal. And I know I'm talking about making the sausage here, but maybe you find it interesting, maybe you don't. But I'm just being reflective, I guess. But I spend an hour or so, and I look at comments and stuff throughout the week and reply on some of it. but I don't spend a lot of time trying to build this up. But if I've made quite a few videos, so I don't know how many hours in total of video I've made. And then the ones that are produced, it takes longer than a live talk because there's all the time setting it up and doing different takes and stuff like that. Versus this is just a hit record and go, if you will. But it's like, is it worth it? Does anyone care? Like there's other things that I'm interested in that I love talking about. I think the astral thing was interesting, but it's not something I'm necessarily know enough about to really add much value. But I know a lot about the Enneagram. I'm not a psychologist or a doctor or anything, but it's something that I've learned a lot about. And even though I'm probably need to freshen up on it, I've got a lot of things to say on that, or current events I'm interested in, politics. But there's also the risk of being shadow banned or outright banned by YouTube for having an opinion or putting out information that they don't want people to see. But I think, it's the key is, and that's what I like about non-duality is, you know, it's kind of like Socrates was to the world of philosophy, asking questions of the Socratic method of getting people to think. Because if you focus too much on trying to be right or trying to make statements of fact or whatever, or statements of opinion, even then people can easily dismiss it and not do the work to really dig in to figure out, what they believe or what their thought on it is. So that's where I think, it's better in a lot of cases to ask people questions and make them come up with a reason versus to, if you make a statement, then they look at the statement and easily dismiss it based on their current programming or biases or cultural beliefs. And with non-duality, it's kind of the same thing as like a Socratic method where it just kind of holds up a mirror and says, "Hey, you're not that. You're not that. There is no person," which is a statement, but at the same time, it gets someone to think, well, okay, well, I've always assumed that. Well, what does that mean? So it kind of begs the question, I guess. A lot of times the statements of non-duality beg a question that we have to grapple with or deal with. And so oftentimes that's where people reach out to, you know, myself or other people that get on here and ask for input, answer questions, is because people they want to know, they have questions about things. And so that's, another way of getting people to think. It's other than what does the sound of one hand clapping sound like? That's kind of a philosophical question. But when you make statements like there is no person, which is the opposite of the um, day-to-day assumption of existence, then immediate people say, well, either that's rubbish or that's just pointless crap. Why are you even saying that? That's obviously not true. Or it puts them in a position to be open to ask questions and to look at their own experience and reality in a different way. And so, like I said before, non-duality is a great way of holding up a mirror and saying, this is what you see, this is your perception. Is that really true? But we're human beings, and there's reasons why people are attracted to certain videos or speakers or topics or ideas, is because of the needs that we are trying to fill as human beings, and that's fine. There's one other lyric I wanted to read from that same Cranberries album. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. I think when you get into non-duality, and I was actually looking through a little bit of, I should look at the camera because that's what I'm supposed to do, I guess. So I'll talk to the camera. I'll make it a point. When I recently started looking through I found it on, like, they have the A Course in Miracles. Um, I got it in a book form when I did it back in, I think it was 2016. Um, so I had a book with, the workbook. It was all one book, but it kind of had the whole, what is A Course in Miracles, and then kind of the workbook aspect of it. I was just looking through some of that stuff because I hadn't looked through it in a long time, and see here, I'm not looking at the camera again. I think one of the sense that you get when you say, we create the meaning that life has, or that sort of thing. When you question people's reality and purpose, and maybe what we thought was true is not true, then there's this sense of loss and grief, as far as like a grief of loss about something of yourself. And I think a lot of times that's what people that are into this discussion of non-duality or spirituality or whatever you want to call it, that's a lot of times there's a sense of loss, because the BS that we believe before, that's where, when that starts to fall away, or aspects of ourself are called into question, then we have this sense of loss of identity, this loss, and it feels almost like losing someone. It's losing a part of yourself that was always kind of there, and then you're kind of in this weird sense of, well, who am I? And I think that was, if we want to talk about story or path or journey, that was a big, for me, it was the Enneagram. When I learned about the Enneagram and was shown my personality and said, hey, you thought you were special, but you're just following this. Here's the script that you're following. Here's the story that you're following. You're not as unique as you thought you were. Then it's like, well, I'm just playing a role. I'm just a character in a play. And that's, in some sense, the message of non-duality. And so when that's pointed out, or that's, contemplated or meditated on, then there's this sense of loss. And that's kind of, I guess, the focus of this talk today, is this right now moment of that loss that people can feel. And is it necessary? Is there a reason for it? Does it mean that you're have achieved the pinnacle of whatever? I don't know. If you want me to say one way or the other, that I'd question that, I guess. But I should read a couple comments here. We got some more. Daryl Sanders says, hello, yes, just like soap. He's talking about cilantro. It tastes like soap. I'd have to totally disagree. I'm on the cilantro wagon, if you will. I love cilantro. Nathaniel Peterson says, hi, Martin. I have the perception of seeing with my eyes closed at night as well. It happens surprisingly frequently, actually. And then Daryl asks, are you awake at that time, Nate? So they're talking kind of a little bit more about sleeping, lucid dreaming, astral travel, different things like that. Nathaniel says, asleep but lucid, I would say. Yeah, so it's an interesting topic, because it gives us some flexibility on their perceptions of ourselves, of who we are, when we can see ourselves in different states of consciousness. And that's where meditation is something that people do, where there's an awareness of the self, if you will, from a different perspective, when we're our brain waves are at a theta state or delta state versus more of a waking alpha state, or beta, I guess. So it's one of those situations where that can be instructive of loosening up the attachments that we have. But it's not necessary in the sense of non-duality, the truth of non-duality, because non-duality exists regardless of the perception of it, if you will. So I try to keep bringing it back to non-duality, because I guess that's why we're here talking about stuff. But I did want to read that other lyric from uh, the Cranberries from their No Need to Argue album. This goes along with the idea of losing the self, um, and kind of the sense of that. So here's the lyric from Empty. Something has left my life, and I don't know where it went to. Somebody caused me strife, and it's not what I was seeking. Didn't you see me? Didn't you hear me? Didn't you see me standing there? Why'd you turn out the lights? Did you know that I was sleeping? Say a prayer for me. Help me to feel the strength I did. My identity, has it been taken? Is my heart breaking on me? All my plans fell through my hands. They fell through my hands on me. All my dreams, it suddenly seems empty, empty. So I don't, who knows what Dolores O'Riordan was thinking or feeling when she wrote those lyrics. But, that's the beauty about art and music, is that there's a meaning behind it, but there's a lot of interpretation and a sense from the communication, the idea that we're creating meaning ourselves through witnessing the art or the music. And so I can interpret it in the way that I connect with. And if Dolores was still with us, she could say, hey, you're totally off base. That's not what that song's about. But from me creating a meaning as a human being, it's just what I create, which isn't necessarily true or not true, but it's something that I've given meaning to. And that was one of the things that, when I was looking at A Course in Miracles, I had a conversation in some comments, and from my oneness experience video, it was Mike Bell that I was going back and forth with. But um, the quote I wanted to say from A Course in Miracles is, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. So a lot of that book points to the idea of the creation of meaning, the purpose that we push onto life, the meaning that we give things, the language that we use, and that sort of thing. The unrealness of all of that. But on the flip side, there is a pointing to that which is real, that which does have meaning, that which the separate self is a facsimile of, is trying to recreate through its own purposes. But the meaning exists outside of the meaninglessness that we try to grasp onto. Non-duality is a scam, says Sup Boys. Nathaniel Peterson, hi there, not much, hello. So they're all saying hi, giving each other some high fives in bro fashion. Where are the females at here? It's I think we're getting taken over by a bunch of dudes. And if you're just hopping on now, there's some we talked in the early part of the video a little bit about death and grief and dreams and some interesting things. So you can always check that out if you missed it. But I would just be curious, the question of the video is, does anyone care about non-duality? Who cares about this stuff? If you're into this topic, you come and participate in these live chats. Do any of your family, friends give any sort of care about the topic at all? Or does it seem silly and that sort of thing? I guess my experience is, I think maybe some people that I know watch this partially, but most of the people I know, maybe have some awareness of it, that I make these videos, I do these live talks, and yet it's never, something that ever really, it's kind of like the elephant in the room that just never really gets brought up for whatever reason, which is fine. Non-Duality is a scam says, the females are off doing something frivolous. I don't know if I'd say that. Nathaniel says, apparently the seeing with eyes closed can occur during meditation, though it's not something I personally experienced. Yeah, I don't know about that. I guess, I think meditation can maybe help loosen you up to have more of those experience when you're sleeping. That would be my assumption. 'Cause that's when I meditated more, that was I'll look into the camera, not the chat box. When I meditated more, it was I had more of those experiences. So I guess, I don't want to be uh have fallacious thinking, a fallacy, but my assumption would be that my meditation had some consequence on my experiences at night and dreaming and lucid dreaming and stuff like that. Daryl says, Russ, I get the sense that you feel compelled to do these videos, talk this stuff. Yeah, I think there's like just ambivalence. That's maybe the best word. And that's, I guess, my personality type. But I like doing these videos. I like more doing these live talks because then I think I get energy and creative juices flowing from kind of the back and forth with the chats here. Because if it were just me and there weren't any chats, I'd probably get bored really fast. So it's nice to have some input from you on that end. But like I've said before, I do like the structure, the setting of these talks because then I'm able to freely just kind of flow with what comes into my mind and what I say versus having to do the conversational dance, trying to fit into a conversation or get interrupted. And we all know how that goes in a conversation. So it's nice to be able to have some control over the method of how this message is presented. But as far as being compelled, I don't know. You know, part of me always thinks like, maybe this will be the last one. I don't know. There's other things I don't want to talk about, but I just right now this is the focus, and I think the goal is I think there's maybe a goal that I'm trying to reach that I maybe have an idea or don't have an idea, and this is a way to um, get there indirectly. I'm being obtuse, so I apologize. I think, especially when it comes to the topic of non-duality, it can be a very cathartic, unsettling, disruptive, um, chaotic type of a subject, idea, concept, or whatever you want to call it. Non-duality can do those things, kind of like how the Oracle speaks in the Matrix, her versus the architect. She's there to disrupt the idealized perfection of the Matrix, if you will. And the one is the one that doesn't quite fit in. And I think it's easier for something that's more concrete, something that's more worldly based to be attacked or projected upon or disregarded in a sense that it bolsters more of separation, more of the idea of us versus them. And so I think building a bridge is something that I've always been passionate about, or at least as far as I can remember of, how do we build a bridge? And especially in these times that we live in, certain things are um, are predisposed to create a sense that um, we're separate or trigger people into putting others in categories. And I think this is um, the easiest way to subvert that system of control in the world that we live in a way that cannot be controlled, in a way that cannot be censored, cannot be shut down. Because once you question who you are, then there's an openness to question other assumptions versus trying to convince someone of something that just puts them more into their own bias based on the messenger or the message itself. And so if I try to convince someone of something and they're like, well, who are you to say that? Or you're wrong because of this, or you're just that. And we name call or we attack the person. Um, then it's just more of the same, I guess. However, that's not to say that taking other tactics or routes wouldn't be just as beneficial. But I guess that's where I find myself right now of talking about non-duality in a sense to get people to see maybe there's a bridge there over yonder. Okay, so Jonah says, can you explain in clear terms what non-duality is doing for you? I might have missed it. Well, Jonas, it's doing nothing for me. Non-duality is a scam, says Nate. I don't see the images like that with my eyes closed either. Wisdom comes to me without any shape, sound, or color. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means. Nathaniel says, specifically, I was referring to the perception of seeing the room around me, i.e., my bedroom with eyes closed. Isn't that what you guys are talking about? And Daryl says, but how is that different from a dream? I think it's the level of, if I were to respond to that, I would say it's the level of awareness or conscious ability that you have in those moments. The sense of the being embodied in your bed and seeing the room with eyes closed is a different feeling of being detached in a dream body, if you will, that maybe it isn't as tactile in seeing things in a different area, if you will. So it's just a different sense, and it's hard to describe because you're talking about like consciousness and all that stuff, but it's a different sense, I guess, than a dream. Versus when people are like, when people say, "Oh, I've seen a ghost" or whatever, and like my initial thing is like, "Okay, were you asleep? Were you half asleep? You know, were you on any medication? Were you drunk? What was the sense? Was it like an overlay? Was it, was it a sense of seeing an apparition, or was it like someone that was, seemed to be made of material? And what was your frame of mind?" All right, so Jonah says, you spent all these hours on this channel talking about it. Your actions contradict your answer. Um, yeah, so Jonas had said, can you explain in clear terms what non-duality is doing for you? I might have missed it. Um, I guess there's an inherent paradox in the subject in and of itself. When it comes to, there's kind of two different, if you want to make it dualistic, there's the um, non-duality as a description versus a prescription versus something that is an experience versus something that is a description of reality. I think the benefit of talking about non-duality as a description of reality versus something that um, is a state or an experience is because we've been conditioned. It's the nature of our human experience to want to have this something that we can achieve or become or learn from, or as you said, what it's doing for me or what it's doing for you. I think to answer your question plainly, I think what getting into this subject um, was a kind of a reminder of um, the falseness of my beliefs and the stress and pain that I was creating artificially in my life for no reason, but because I believed something that wasn't true. And so I think that's the best way initially of describing kind of what the benefit for me was, but it's not the sense that non-duality is a practice or something that you do. It's a way to describe reality, and what you do with it is of your own accord, and it cares not whether or not you believe it or not. And so I think the reason why a lot of times people speak of non-duality in more descriptive versus experiential and say things there's no person, no one's doing anything, it's all that stuff, is because it's the separate self, if you want to call it the ego, whatever, attaches to the idea and makes it a belief, makes it something to achieve. And so if you're constantly saying no, 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 well, yeah, but what about this? No. Well, yeah, but what about this? No. But no. Well, can I do this? No. Can I achieve this? No. Well, yeah, but you were saying that no. Yeah, but you said that you had it. No. Well, that's a story. No. It's like this constant negation of our assumptions, of our attachments. And so that's where once you start talking about non-duality doing something for you, then it becomes something to attach to. Whereas I guess if it were to have one purpose, you could describe it as forgiveness or a negation or whatever. But essentially non-duality is pointing to the not to-ness of reality, the separation as an illusion, not meaning that there is no duality versus non-duality. That's another duality. It's just non-duality is in the aspect in an absolute sense of reality, and the form of reality is an illusion in the essence of its nature of constant change. And so there, once you try to define a form, it becomes something else. And so once you say that is that, it becomes something else and is no longer what you said it was. It's automatically negated. And so as much as we try to hold on to the shifting sands of time and of manifestation, it constantly shifts and changes. And so there's never something that you can tangibly grab onto and say, that is true, that is real. Because in the very next moment, in saying it, it becomes unreal because it's in the past. And so we're constantly seeing things in the past and saying that they're real. Hopefully that's a little better answer. I'm trying not to be uh Tony Parsons and all this, but it's all contradictory. That's why it sounds kind of annoying, and sometimes I just honestly get tired of saying the same thing over and over again. But that's because the mind wants to attach constantly, so it's kind of like something that always is a possibility to point out because the mind is always attaching. That's what it does. It's there to create meaning. So hopefully that helps or whatever. All right, so back on the conversation chat board. Scam says astral projection. Nathaniel says there are states where the difference between dream and waking life is a bit muddled. Daryl says agreed. Scam says, I think he's saying, why are you making these videos if it's not doing anything for you? My words, not his. I tried in a long just a few minutes ago to try to explain it in a not very cohesive or coherent way why I make these videos. But right now I'm making them. I may not make them in the future. Who's to say? I don't really know. Um, but I have the same feeling of what's the point? But obviously, in the fact that this is what appears to be happening, it's something that I want to do. That's that's the obvious truth of the matter. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. Nathaniel says, "Yeah, something like that. Perhaps being in the prepped out of body state, but not leaving the body." Daryl says, "I hear y'all, but think about it. Nothing actually leaves the body. Difficult to verify, Daryl." Daryl says, "Or perhaps I should ask what actually leaves the body." All very interesting. I'm kind of skimming through your comments. A lot of it's about astral projection, which isn't really, or lucid dreaming, that sort of thing. It's not really on non-duality, but that's fine. I think, to some extent, if you're here to talk about non-duality, I don't want to lose the forest for the trees. But Nathaniel says consciousness, I presume. However, in my experience, there's the presence of a dual awareness where there's awareness in both the body and the so-called astral body. Scam says some people non-duality is a belief system. For others, it is a way to understand self-inquiry. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, to some extent, it gets a little old trying to. I think there is a need to define terms in this field of discussion, but at the same time, it gets old because then we just focus so much on defining terms and trying to carve out meaning and trying to understand it intellectually that we're kind of missing the whole point because the best way to say it that other speakers say is that there's nothing to get, you'll never get it, no one shows up. And once that saying is stated, then it kind of negates the need or the seeking of trying to find the answer, which can cause people to be annoyed or say this is a bunch of crap. But the mind, seemingly never gets tired of trying to create meaning, and so even if you know, it's the yes but of the mind. If you make a statement, there is no person. Yes, but well, I get it now. This makes sense to me. Yeah, but um, the world is an illusion. Yeah, but what about this? What about that? And it's just a way to self-perpetuate itself. And so the thing, if you want to say it in this way, the thing that is seeking relief from the separation is the separate self itself. And so it's trying to find relief as itself, as Paul Hederman would say. And so you want to find the truth, the ultimate holy grail of non-duality. You want to have the epiphany understanding so you can have a sense of non-dual awareness that's infinitely generated. You want to have a continual automatic release from pain and suffering. And so there's this need to try to find the answer, and yet that which is seeking the answer is that which is holding on to the attachment. And recognizing that, I guess, is the first step to recovery, the step that doesn't need to be taken. um let's see, Nathaniel says it's a learning process. I expect that in a few years what I think I know now will evolve into something entirely different. Daryl says yes, Nate. I guess, to Jonas's inquiry, if Jonas is still on. I sometimes I get tired, especially with live talks, of saying the same thing thing over and over again. But I have made other videos that are maybe a little more concise on the definition of things, and so that can maybe be helpful for where you're at. I am thinking at some point of making a video of kind of just an intro. What is non-duality for people that are new to it? Kind of gets to the base of which I have some of those videos, but more of a just a audio vocal of me kind of reading what I prepared with some sort of imagery that is relaxing or something. That's what people are looking for. So then that would be a way, as far as an introductory video, for people to say, "Oh, okay, at least I get the conceptually what they're talking about." Because most of my focus is more on people that are into the subject and trying to, ultimately deprogram from the continual attachments of the new non-dual, belief system. Scam says, that's why there is a famous quote, the only thing I know is I know nothing. Love it, says Daryl. Scam says, we kind of know, then later we kind of know better, and it goes on like that. Yeah, I think, knowing, it's partially a definition of terms, what knowledge is and all that sort of thing. You can talk about true knowledge or wisdom and differentiate that from other kinds of knowledge, worldly knowledge, informational knowledge, skills, intuitive knowledge. And so the thing about non-duality is it takes it to the nth degree, it takes it to infinity. It goes all the way, and so it doesn't necessarily need to destroy anything. So it doesn't say that there is no knowledge of the world, of knowing that, you know, the sky is blue, or this is a dresser, or I'm sitting on a floor and there's carpet, and this is a microphone, and on that level of knowledge, that's true. But is it really a microphone, or is it just energy, empty space? Is it, what is time? What is a dresser? Is this just wood and we call it that? What is language? And so you go down that rabbit hole, but non-duality is not saying that you need to get rid of all meaning and all language and all knowledge. It's not saying that there is no knowledge whatsoever. It contains that. It contains the duality. It contains the knowledge of the three-dimensional world that we live in. And so there are things that are truer than others. There is, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is something that's empirically or observably truer than others. And so, we talk about, oh, it's my truth. Well, there is my truth, but then there's objective truth as well. Daryl says, ultimately, it is all blah, 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 laugh out loud. Kind of, yeah. And that's that. Maybe the reason why I do these live talks is because I have a penchant, is that the right word? A need to babble. And so this is a way to free flow my thoughts and get it out into the world and towards people that maybe actually find it somewhat relevant to their lives versus people in my immediate world that maybe don't. And so it allows me to kind of have an outlet for that. I guess that's maybe one way you can look at it. So that's probably a better definition if is it Daryl that was wondering? That's probably the better way of saying it. But I have personal goals and beliefs and stuff that, you know, other motivations for doing this as well, which I try to illuminate, but did a poor job. Non-duality is a scam says many unconscious people would not admit that objective truth exists. Yeah, I think that's another. I'm glad we're just to kind of bring this full circle to the faithful departed Dolores O'Riordan. She also had another song on that album, on the Cranberries album, which most people are more familiar with this song because they still play it sometimes on certain radio stations. But it's called Zombie. Let's see. Another head hangs lowly, child is slowly taken, and the violence caused such silence. Who are we mistaken? But you see, it's not me, it's not my family. In your head, they are fighting with their tanks and their bombs and their bombs and their guns. In your head, they are crying. In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. There you go. Daryl says that would involve an agreed definition of truth. I think ultimate truth, if you want to use that terminology, big T truth, capitalized truth, doesn't need to be defended or, I mean, it is what it is. I think there's a level of faith in life that's needed because we fail as human beings to be able to really grasp or believe in the truth. And so there's a belief that's needed because we lack the faith in and of ourselves. Scam says the Cranberries. Yep, she understands. Scam says, I would say that the truth is, I think is what actually happened. I don't know. Go Cranberries, says Daryl. Yeah. You know, I think she was 46 when she died. And I should look at the camera, but I just don't feel like it. So there you go. That's the reality of the moment. You know, when people pass away, they die, become deceased, whatever term you want to use. It's a reminder of the temporal nature of reality, of life, and all mental jewelry, the dance that we try to do intellectually to avoid that reality. But life, aliveness is the truth, is what always is. And so, in a sense, the loss is an illusion, but just in saying that doesn't give it justice, I guess. Scam says definition for truth equals what actually happened. Oh, we got a new person. Hizareth Iberi. I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. You should read to Ramana Maharshi and Robert Adams. Okay. Darrell says, then say what those who say nothing is actually happening. Hizareth says this guy is only confusing people. Are you saying, am I this guy? Am I that guy? This guy is only confusing people. Hey, everybody. Hey, this guy's a fraud. All right, so I do want to read one other thing, and then we're going to wrap it up here because I'm going to do something else today. I will leave you with Romans, if I can find it here. Romans. All right, so Romans 5:5. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. That's Romans 5:5. Thank you for joining. We may or may not see you next time. If there is a next time.